Everyone is talking about what AI can do for your business. Fewer people, however, are talking about what your business needs to do first. That gap is where most operators are getting stuck. Today, we're talking about AI and operations, not the tools or the hype or whether or not you should be using it. We're going to assume you're already thinking about it, probably already using it, and we want to give you three things that need to be true in your business and on your side of the equation before AI can really be leveraged in your business. Because the dirty secret is that AI is only as good as the operation you pointed at. Hi, I'm Sarah Wilson, a fractional COO and turnaround partner for founder led SMB. I help businesses struggling with complexity and challenges within their operational core. I work with founders to install scalable, repeatable processes and unlock scale with the tools and teams they already have.
And hi, I'm Penny Cook. I'm also a fractional COO and a strategic operations consultant helping product and consumer brands install, upgrade, and run scalable operations and operational systems that reflect the founder's unique vision and ambition. Let's get into it. This is such a timely topic, Sarah. Every
Absolutely.
operations team I know of is talking about how they can leverage AI. And there are things that you can do with AI, but there are some overriding rules here, overarching rules, I mean to say, that need to be true for your operation to really be able to leverage AI in the way that's going to be unique to your operation and your business. The first tip that we want to give you is context. AI needs to know who you are and who your team is, who your brand is. Most operators give it almost nothing and wonder why that output feels generic. AI doesn't know your business. It only knows what you give in that moment. And you want it to be problem solving specifically for your brand, your context, your team makeup, and the voice and needs of your operation. A real world example for this is I'll give you an example of a specialty food brand with a very loyal, passionate customer base and a very distinct voice, was trying to create some customer facing copy for a launch that they had coming up, and everything they gave to AI came out sounding like it was an Amazon listing. Technically correct,
Yes.
completely devoid of the thing that made that brand special. They weren't getting bad AI though. They were getting the AI they asked for without giving it the direction of who they were. So Sarah, what do we do about that when we need to teach AI who we are?
Penny, I love that question. It can be a really good place to start to gather your thoughts and put together what I like to call a context document. So when we're thinking about context, it's like you said, context of our business. So what especially if you're in a business where, think about it, you're familiar with the acronyms, right? You might be super familiar with the acronyms because you're in a specialized area of business, but then it's those acronyms or those letters, if you will, that people outside your business have no idea what you're talking about. Those are one of the first things that I would put in a context document for sure. But building on that, tone of voice, who your customer is, and it's very important to use plain language so that it's easily understood what you're actually referring to and what you're talking about.
Yeah, having that context document or a brief for AI that your team is going to share will help AI always understand how to problem solve in the context that you're trying to problem solve in. And it'll also provide some consistency across your team, because you could be writing prompts very differently than your teammate or someone else who's on a different team in your org where work ultimately gets shared. So if everyone's working off that same context document, AI brief, whatever works for your business to call it, you're going to find more consistency. And you can, regardless of what AI you're using, if you're using ChatGPT, there's personalization instructions you can give it. If you're using Claude, you can start every conversation with, here's my context document that we'll be solving this with. Same with Copilot. You can give it that upfront every time you're out there solving a problem. And it's not keep in mind it's not a one-time setup with AI, because you could always be starting new chat sessions, but also it needs to evolve with your business, and you need to make sure everyone is working off the most current and
Current,
most
up to date.
relevant context document for AI.
Yes, and I would build on that is we've given a really great starting point for a document here. But as time goes on and that evolution you mentioned, you will know what you're missing because you will get output that you either don't expect or is missing something key. So when the people who are using that context document come across results they don't expect, those are hint hint things that should also be put into the context document.
Absolutely. I think the key is that you always have it. Everyone's on the same page, and just know that generic ask in means generic content out, and providing context means that you're going to customize that output for who you are, and who better to teach AI who you are in your organization than the people in the organization.
Exactly. We've come across that term in the data world, of course, garbage in, garbage out. Don't like the term garbage per se, but it does speak to that importance of what you put in
Of
is
context. Yeah,
is
for sure.
exactly is going to drive the quality
Yeah.
you get out. And that brings us to the next one. Next really important point for those listening is use AI for problems that are worth solving. So it's completely, I think it's completely normal and understandable that one would start with drafting emails, right? That's kind of the easiest thing. Those are the things that before we had AI, we actually wrote emails and thought them out and edited and used spell check and all the things
Yeah, we
everybody,
do that. We did that.
right? And it's the AI is absolutely great for that. It's great for summaries, but it's getting the next task on the list is thinking of something that is really going to have a massive impact of automating with AI. So high frequency, high stakes work, tasks that are repeating, they follow a predictable pattern, and they take disproportionate away time away from thinking work. So it's those manual, I'm going to say spreadsheet work. It might not always be in the spreadsheet. It might be in the ERP. It might be a blend of both. I'll walk you through an example of what that might look like. So a mid-sized logistics company has a team lead who puts together a really critical leadership report every Monday. So they're taking information from 3 different data sources. We all wish that our ERPs or accounting systems was all the central place we get all of our data, but that is not the reality in the majority of businesses. So this team lead has 3 different sources, and it's a really high pressure kind of timeline on a Monday because the leadership team is expecting this data. They need this information to start key decision making and key discussions for the week. So there's always a if this report is delayed in any amount of time, there's emails flying and check-ins and when is this going to become available? This is a great example where you would actually use AI to automate the process. You really should be using AI to save 5 minutes on a task you do once a week instead of saving an hour on a task you do every day. And when it comes to using AI for such high leverage, high importance tasks, there might be a little bit of a hesitation on getting comfortable with using AI for something that is so critical to the business, right? We've heard that AI can make mistakes. Well, what does that mean? So I just want to break that down a little bit while you think of that high leverage, high important work to automate is, sometimes that fear of accuracy might be stopping us from using AI for those tasks. And, we see headlines so often that AI gets it wrong and it gives really bad results. Now, while the research isn't plentiful yet, the what we do know is that hallucination can hover around 40 to 60 in a kind of know-it-all mode, but we can actually get that hallucination down to less than 2% of the time if we move to what's called a grounded framework. And a grounded framework looks like, we go back to that 3 source document example, we give the AI an example of all 3 sources. We are specific and explain where the data is, what it's doing, why it's important, and then we give it an example of the output. That structure with AI, actually, you have a high degree of success when you model a process like that. So I
Yeah.
encourage anyone thinking about what they're going to automate to think about making it grounded versus
Yeah.
I have this very generic process. I need it automated. Here, go do that. And the reason why, and I may not get this completely technically right for those listening, but if AI doesn't have all of the information, it is programmed to fill in the blanks and make assumptions with information it doesn't have. So that is actually the source of a lot of the hallucination. Whereas if you've given it the detail like I just described, it doesn't have an opportunity to make those same mistakes.
Right. So these are tips, Sarah, that really build on each other, right? So making sure that you have the right context document and you're giving it those base level instructions, like making sure that it has a validation point for every synthesis that it's making as it's looking at your different sources of information, but also it is not going to hallucinate. It can cite every source of every piece of information it gave you, and you should absolutely expect that. And then picking the right work for it to do where it doesn't, as you said, have an opportunity to hallucinate. So pattern-based work is where AI really earns its keep in operations teams. Things that you mentioned, like recurring reports, standard communications, first draft documents, reports that have multiple data sources, and things that need to be synthesized that allow you to then do the analysis in your organization rather than spending all of your time pulling things together. And this really, stacking these up, bring us to the third tip that we have, which is keep a human in the loop. So don't assume that you have a process that you're going to farm out, whether you're using agentic AI or whether you're just having conversations with Claude online to have some output. Don't assume that everything it's giving you, you're just going to take at face value. You need checks and balances on this, just like you would have checks and balances on, if somebody were creating an important communication in your organization, there would be proofreaders on that. So make sure that you have a human in the loop to make sure that the sources are still being taken in the way that you trust, the output is still trustable, and that you're able to catch any of those glitches before they're seen outside of your organization. So that's not to say that you have the same number of people involved in everything. That's just to say that there is human oversight here, and we're not handing this all over to the machine and forgetting it and think they're doing a better job than we are. Because
Yes.
they're going to run aground at some point, and someone needs to catch that and bring them back onto the tracks.
And I would build on that too when it comes to thinking about that designated reviewer. One trap I want to encourage people not to get caught up in. If you're the one designing that process, often, in operations, we get a lot of tenured folks who are technical and knowledgeable about all parts of the business. Don't get caught in the trap of everyone just knows that this is right or that's right. Sometimes we want to think about the next generation, maybe junior employees who might end up being reviewers just might not have that context to recognize errors like we would, having been
That's
in the
right.
business a long time. So when you think about designating those reviewers, try to put yourself in their shoes for a moment just to gather their level of understanding of the process and the business and just so that they know what good looks like.
We do spend a lot of time in our work watching smart operators make the same mistake with AI. We're all learning
Yes.
and we're all looking for shortcuts. But what is actually needed in operation is a foundation before we can take any of those shortcuts. Businesses that are winning with AI right now are not the ones with the best tools or the biggest budgets. They're the ones who did that unglamorous structural work first, which is something we always look at on operations teams. They got clear on who they are. They found the right problems to solve, and they stayed close enough to the work to catch it when the tool got something wrong. That's the difference between using AI and operating with AI. And it's a meaningful difference. Right, Sarah?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Penny. So if we want our listeners to take away the three important things as you will, remember, first we give AI context. Tell it who you are, how you talk, who your customer is, what your industry is all about, and things that might kind of live in everybody's consciousness, but that we don't say out loud very often. We need to tell AI that, and the context document is the great place to start. Second, of course, we want to make sure to give AI a really meaningful problem to attack. Knowing, the generic use cases, those are great, and we're not saying stop doing that. But what we are saying is to really use AI to drive success in your business, you really need to find that high frequency, pattern based in pattern based work in your operation, things your team does consistently that follow a relatively predictable nature. And lastly, of course, we can't forget the human part of things. We absolutely need to keep humans in the loop in every process. AI makes mistakes rather confidently, I would say. It will give you the absolute wrong, answer with its full chest, as they say. And we really need to build in a review step at that part of the process, and especially anything customer facing, and then calibrate from there. So if you found this episode useful, share it with another operator that's navigating the AI question. And if you are actually looking to do this work, building the context, finding the right problems, getting the right humans in the right place for the right workflows, this is exactly the thing that Penny and I help teams with. Reach out on LinkedIn or on our Operating on Purpose website. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen. We'd love to talk about what the right AI implementation could look like for your business.
Because great businesses don't just happen, they operate on
On
purpose.
purpose. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Penny.
everyone. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks.
See you next
Bye.
time.